and delivered right to our door today. Chronic Hoosier, how are you, sir?
Glad to be back, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure. I know that you were stoked to see Indiana get past Penn State last Sunday, as they will continue their massive streaks and records and continuation of NCAA records. I think consecutive appearances. I don't even know how many
37.
national records.
37 straight.
Well, I don't even know how many records that they have extended with this.
That's the thing. When you're a program like Indiana men's soccer, every time you post a W, you're setting a new record. And I don't say that flippantly. I mean, just literally, it's just what they do. They win, and they win at a level that's really unprecedented in college sports since their inception. It's nothing short of just absolutely ridiculous. But even more ridiculous this year for me was a team that most people thought was dead in the water at the end of September, likely to break the consecutive tournament streak, with little to no chance of competing for a Big Ten title. And then, as Yeagley's do, they go ahead and pull off the double, bring home two of the three goals for the season, and get themselves in prime position for the third and the ultimate goal, which is the ninth start in NCAA tournament. And it starts this Thursday here in Bloomington. So always fun to get to see the boys play in tournament time. As a lifelong IU soccer fan, it's just kind of ingrained in you. You know, when the weather starts to turn and get a little nastier outside, you know the consequences just go up. And as luck would have it, that always seems to be when the Hoosiers are playing their best. And this year is probably just the exemplary year for that mindset. You know, playing your best ball when cups are on the line. And Hoosiers coming into the tournament hot. And as we've seen in years past, when Indiana kind of dominated throughout the season, oftentimes it's not necessarily the best team in the field that wins it, but the one that's playing its best soccer. And Indiana certainly has a case to be among those teams this year.
Seems to be that way at all of sports. Yeah, you got to get hot at the right moment. We were, before you joined us, was talking about Indiana basketball at the moment, and Stephen, thinks that I'm being a little harsh on them. I'm not being harsh. I'm not saying anything other than what has been said by Mike Woodson, or asking questions that are legit questions. And they've stated themselves, they're not playing hard. They're not preparing hard. And part of it is they have to take that upon themselves. Partly it's a coach's responsibility as well, but the players have to take this upon themselves. This is not something you can sleepwalk through. There are a litany of teams that are ready to go at it tonight. We get to watch Kansas and Kentucky, Duke and Michigan State. This weekend, a slate of games. It's going at it and being ready to play as hard as you can, no matter what. And Mike Woodson has pointed out that hasn't exactly been the case for his squad so far.
No, I think that's totally fair assessment. I think that's not even a subjective opinion necessarily, as much as that's coming from the head coach. That's coming from some of the players that have been given the chance to speak with the media afterwards. And quite frankly, I think it just resonates with what everyone has seen with their eyes in these first two regular season games. Is it's just not good enough. The effort's not good enough. The intensity's not good enough. The execution's not good enough. And they're running out of runway here in order to get locked in on that. Because after Thursday's tilt against Wright State, you got Connecticut. You then get Maryland, Michigan, Auburn, and Kansas. You absolutely don't want to be upside down on the schedule heading into the winter break. And that's a very real possibility for Indiana right now if they can't figure out exactly what type of a team they are and how they want to play. And, from what we've seen from Mike Woodson coached teams, it's going to take a whole lot more on the defensive end, first and foremost. And the offense is always going to be a little bit behind, I think, especially in a season like this with so many new faces. But at the end of the day, they've got to commit to playing a higher level of defense than what we've seen right now, because quite frankly, you cannot take teams that are not 3-point shooting teams and let them just light you up like they have. They've been completely nonplussed in defending the perimeter and contesting for rebounds, loose balls, and the like. And those are just things of intensity. That's want, that's will, and so far it's been lacking. So it's time to get that fixed real quick because come Sunday, the Hoosiers stand a very real chance of falling into a similar trap to what the women's basketball team faced out in Palo Alto this last weekend, which is just walking into an absolute meat grinder, and it's just not a fun way to start the season, especially when you had so many hopes right now. So I'm not writing the season off just yet, but I am certainly among those
Oh, by no
who have
means.
who have been pretty heavily disappointed with what we've seen thus far from the Hoosiers.
And it is a little surprising, but if it's just effort, then that's something that can be rectified. And hopefully for Hoosier fans, that's how that will be. A few great points to look at is the play of Kalel Ware. The only thing that negative you knock on him right now is he needs to play as well in the first half as he does the second half.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that's been kind of stark is, in matchups where Indiana just has head and shoulders advantage, literally and figuratively, as far as height, length, athleticism, and skill. Just an unwillingness to exert that. I think in both games, Woody has tried to play big, and in both games, he's had to revert to going small. And you would expect a team as seemingly capable as the Hoosiers to be able to dictate play, to play how they want to, and that hadn't been the case, quite frankly. And it's largely been because of the defensive breakdowns that have forced them to adjust the rotations. So that's a little bit troubling, considering how much athleticism, how much length Indiana has. And Khalil's one of those guys you would expect, when you're playing guys that you've got an entire head over, you should be able to dominate, kind of like JV versus varsity. And well, he's put up some numbers. I wouldn't quite put the play anywhere near the category of dominance. So, and it could be that he's not built for that. I'm not saying one way or another he is or isn't. That's why we play the game, to figure out who we are. But it's been a little bit disappointing in that regard that they haven't been able to sustain it. They haven't been able to really push when they want. I know this isn't going to be a post-driven team like we've seen in years past, but that's not to say, especially when the shots aren't falling from outside, that you shouldn't be able to dump it down and just get a guaranteed bucket.
Yeah, it could be because they do have some. I wouldn't call them veterans, obviously, with Kalel Ware being a sophomore and Malik Renu being a sophomore, but experienced players, at least Malik Renu. He had a ton of experience last year, and then playing behind Trace Jackson Davis or with Trace Jackson Davis gave him a good education there. And he's been okay this season. I wouldn't say anything spectacular, but he's been okay. He's not somebody who I think is going to be the leading scorer of this team. I think Kalel Ware will ultimately be the leading scorer for this team. And he's shown that he has that penchant for being able to put up some big numbers, even though it's been in the second half, to light a fire. And when that fire gets lit, he comes alive, and he can affect the game so much differently than probably anybody else on the court, because, again, he does have the ability of passing out of whether it's in the post or wherever, with his height, blocking. He can alter shots. And then, of course, offensively, what he can get done. So he's obviously Indiana's most I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but the player who can do the most as far as different talents.
No, he certainly has one of the highest ceilings on the team, and I think in that conversation, just as we think Khalil can really perform. The flip side of that coin is how much potential we haven't seen realized thus far from Mbako. With the accolades he brings, the attributes, 2 points, a couple of turnovers, couple of boards, that's a stat line you'd expect from your 8th and 9th guy off the bench. Certainly not one of your starters. Certainly not a 5-star come in. And as Woody made clear, he's going to have to learn how to play the ball the right way on both ends of the floor. And I think it starts on the defensive end with him. But it's been pretty underwhelming thus far. I'm curious to see if he continues to run only with the two, the three big set, uh, rather than sliding him to the four when they go small, and see if he can't get a little bit more active that way. Um, but when you look at unrealized potential on that roster right now, in the first couple of games, I think Mbako is probably at the front of the line on guys the Hoosiers are going to need more from on a night-to-night basis. And then, I would go down the bench and say probably Trey Galloway's not far behind that as a captain and senior leader on the team and a starting guard. But I'm also looking at that bench top to bottom and say, if Indiana's going to have a chance to compete, they've got to be able to leverage their depth. And part of that means those guys coming in when they hear the number called, they've got to go out and contribute on both ends of the floor. But they're going to have to get points. You can't just have an offensive breakdown whenever the starters sit. And that was certainly something that was a little bit concerning in this weekend's game against Army. That bench really didn't give a whole lot, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think that also I just realized one of the things that Indiana is just really, really missing right now is Jakai Newton, because he could put pressure on Mbako, whether it's in practice. I don't think Mbako, who's going to push him? A walk-on? So, and it's not like playing a regular game, of course. Not having him there has maybe had more of an ill effect than we know.
Yeah, quite possibly. And right now his greatest teacher is hopefully going to be the bench, because Woody has not been afraid to use the Pine as a teaching tool with him. And I don't know how much longer he's going to be afforded that opportunity. When you start up in the level of play like Indiana's going to see here in the coming weeks, you're running into a murderer's row of opponents here, and Indiana has got to be able to match them athletically, physically, especially at that spot. It's very much a guards game, but when you look at the teams that are able to really hurt you, um, guys like Mbako have been a thorn in Indiana's side for a long time. Just such a difficult matchup when they're on. So for Indiana to have an asset like that, they've got to find a way to get him more involved, both in the offense as well as the defense. And I think one of the struggles so far is Indiana's has not been able to get out and transition nearly as much as I think you'd like to see, which is I think probably where guys like McKenzie and Khalil, for that matter, are going to be a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more effective. But that's got to start on the defensive end, quite frankly. And if they're not able to get stops and create some turnovers, it's going to be hard if they're constantly forced into a half-court set, as the offense is trying to figure out exactly what its rhythms are, because right now it's very much not very rhythmic offensively. So get some easy buckets, get some steals, and get the crowd involved. When you've got Assembly Hall behind you, it's tough sitting there and watching a half where people barely get out of their seats, because quite frankly the basketball is just a little bit uninspired. And it's going to be there in the second half, but give them a reason to get out of their seat early on. Play some of that crunch time ball early, get a lead, get a little bit of a cushion, then start to grow it. And for the love of God, let's cover a spread once this season.